T-minus 1 minute, 54 seconds and counting. Our status board indicates...
Wednesday, July 16, 1969.
Just a little out tonight.
Pad 39A, Kennedy Space Center, Florida. A dream of the ages was about to come true. The unbelievable countdown was on.
1, 2, or 3.
Number 3.
4. No, Bob, it was only 3. I know, you're nervous. Okay. 1, 2, or 3.
2, 1.
2, 1. No,
what? Number 3, man. Number 3.
1, 2.
3, 2, 1.
What's he doing? 1, black light, no tap backs.
T-minus 1 minute, 35 seconds on the Apollo mission, the flight to land of the first men on the moon.
Let that sucker up, man. Go to the moon.
All indications.
At 9:32 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the Apollo 11 spacecraft with astronauts Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, and Michael Collins aboard was to be lifted by the flaming power of the 36-story Saturn V rocket into the vacuum of space. They would begin a 500,000-mile odyssey, a voyage which would include, for Armstrong and Aldrin, a day on another world.
That dude is cool, man. I never had it before, man. I didn't think it was going to be like this, man. Oh,
T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus...
Hundreds of thousands of people jammed the roads and beaches miles from the launch site. Radio and television carried the event to hundreds of millions more throughout the world. My colleague, CBS News correspondent Reed Collins, described the final seconds as the fulfillment of man's lunar destiny came closer.
I never had it before, man. That's gonna make me die. It's gonna make me freak out, man. I seen those guys that walk around my neighborhood had too many heads, man. Their head looked like a pumpkin like that, man.
Wow,
Down to 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. We should see fire. 4, 3, 2.
Come on, come on, baby. Here we go. Come on, start it. Come on, baby. Okay, one more chance. I'm gonna make a go-kart out of you. Come on, here we go. Start it. Here we go. Come on, baby.
Have ignition. We have tremendous flame out there. All engines, and we have liftoff.
Hey, first gear. Here we go. It's a gear. Here we go.
She's rising. She's yawing now to clear the tower. That slight yaw. Now the huge tail is passing the tower. She's lifting up. We have tower clear. We have tower clear. We're beginning to feel the first thunderous roar. I can see her rising now as she's going up straight into the roll program, which she should be completing. We should expect to hear from the astronauts as this spit of land is beginning to shake.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello, headquarters. Come in, headquarters.
Hello?
Hey, man, listen very carefully, man. Don't answer the phone, man. You got that? Don't answer the phone. Even if it's me calling, man, don't answer because I think the phone is bugged, man. Okay?
Within a few moments, the staccato roar of 7.5 million pounds of thrust faded away. What millions had paused to watch was quickly out of sight. 12 minutes later, the first and second stages of the launch vehicle burned out. Apollo 11 was in orbit around the Earth. There was time now to describe the takeoff.
Hit the light switch. Hey, man. Hey, come on, man.
Hey, man. Like, wow, man.
Hey, man, how far you going, man?
In the end of the block, man.
Houston, Apollo 11, that Saturn gave us a magnificent ride. We have no complaints with any of the 3 stages on that ride. It was beautiful.
Is that lard ash?
Still attached to the Apollo 11 spacecraft was the Saturn's third-stage rocket, containing the Eagle, the lunar module, the craft that would land on the moon. It If all systems checked out during the first orbit of Earth, ground controllers at the Manned Space Flight Center in Houston would give the go for TLI, Translunar Injection, permission to start the third stage engine again, 227,000 pounds of thrust to increase the speed of Apollo 11, to drive it into a moon-bound path.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are go for TLI, over. Apollo 11, thank you.
The next job was to separate the Apollo 11 command module, code name.
The code name. Headquarters. Headquarters, come in, please. This is code name. Hard hat. Give me.
When this undocking was done, the third stage was fired once again to send it out of the way. Now Columbia and Eagle, united together as Apollo 11, began to coast out of Earth's gravity toward the invisible spot in space where the moon would be 3 days later. What was the remarkable string of events which had brought our nation to the eve of this great adventure? October 4th, 1957, the space shot heard around the world. While we were leisurely getting the Vanguard satellite with its 20-pound payload ready for launch, the Russians put the 184-pound Sputnik 1 into orbit. The beeping voice of this Soviet space spectacular delighted the world, but at home there was shock. April 12th, 1961 was another date we would remember on our way to the moon. Yuri Gagarin's 89-minute flight in orbit around the Earth only seemed to place us even further behind. And then on May 5th, 1961, we finally had something to shout about.
Is that a joint, man? That there looks like a quarter pounder, man.
Spirits soared with Alan Shepard when he became the first American astronaut to sit atop a rocket and blast off on a suborbital flight 302 miles out into the Atlantic.
Cabin pressure is holding at 5.5. 5G. Everything looks A-okay here. Periscope is coming out. Periscope coming out.
God! Oh, Jesus Christ, will you look at the size of that thing?